Yeah, we can probably start.
Hello, hello. Okay. Okay, let's get right to the program then. Let's see. The one thing I do want to mention is that the Q&A this Saturday, right, will be at your place.
Sort of. The Q&A will be canceled.
So it's not happening.
But I'm sorry, no. Yes. The green apples will be canceled. Q&A starting at 3 at my house.
Okay.
And we'll do some beginner stuff to whoever comes there.
Is the address on the home page or
yes.
is it okay. So we're good there. Beyond that, is there anything else I need to remember? Gosh, I don't think so. Lyle Tag is going to talk to us about the annual income tax celebrations. And then we'll talk about other stuff. Thanks for coming.
And, of course, the streamer doesn't want to start again. Cool. Yeah, you can see how to turn a MacBook into a Chromebook. All right, so the streaming is not working, but the recording is. The school must be blocking the streaming port. Did you ever try to talk to that? I didn't get a chance to, no. You got his info if we need to do it. Yeah. Yeah. And there's no error log that I can see to see. There we are, log files. Why is it failing? Get socket error handshake failed. Anyone know what that means? Yeah. Yep. So that makes me think they might be blocking the RTSP port. Oh well. Alrighty, so if we go to this window, and where's my iPad? Oh, doesn't matter because we're not streaming. I don't need to watch the stream because we're not actually streaming. Yeah. I can also turn off the second camera for now until Lyle comes up. So let's turn that one off. All right. So, let's see. News. Apple had a very interesting quarter. A couple of days before the quarterly announcement, Tim Cook announced that they were going to miss their projection. So they were projecting, originally they were projecting between $85 and $93 million, or billion with a B, in revenue for the quarter, and they missed and only got to $84 billion. And the stock market went crazy, punishing Apple. All the Apple is doomed messages and blogs started going around. They still made $84 billion in revenue for the quarter. That's nearly $1 billion a day. Most companies making $1 billion a day, no one would consider them beleaguered or a problem. One of the things that the stock market wants to know, though, is that every quarter you must grow from the last quarter. And so that upset people because they didn't grow. They actually lost a little bit. It's actually the first quarter where they missed their projections in like 10 years or some ridiculous thing like that. And I want to find the 6 colors. 6 Colors quarterly results. So Jason Snell at 6 Colors always puts together these really great charts. So it was their second biggest quarter ever, but it was down 5%. iPhone revenue was down, but services grew 20%, or almost 20%. And so what most people are saying and surprised is that the iPad also grew by 17% because the iPad has been on a downturn the last few quarters. And so this is where Apple is currently making their money on their quarterly sales. So it's 62% iPhone, iPad, Mac. Services is iCloud, iCloud subscriptions, the Apple Music streaming service, any of the Apple online App Store sales, things like that. That's all bundled into services. And services grew, 20%. Yeah, so basically with services, you buy a hard drive and an internet pipe, and the money rolls in. There's actually an interesting conspiracy theory that Apple's actually being sued for, that they only give you 5 gigabytes of free iCloud storage per Apple ID. We wish they would raise that, because 5 gigs is not enough. It may have been enough when your iPhone and iPad that came out were 4 gig and 8 gig. Maybe even 5 gigs per device would be handy, but no, they haven't done that either. And if you run out of storage space, then it's 99 cents a month for 50 gigs, which is very reasonable compared to all of the other paid tiers from the other companies. So there's someone trying to file a class action lawsuit that Apple is intentionally giving you little free space to force you to buy more space. Right. Yeah. So 99 cents a month, less than $12 a year. But no one is forcing you to do that. The two big things that use cloud storage are your iOS backups, and you can back up to your computer instead of the cloud. It's more convenient to back up to the cloud because it does that automatically. You plug into Wi-Fi and power, so at night when you're charging your device, it will automatically back up to iCloud. If you want to back it up to your computer, you have to manually hit the backup button. And the second thing is iCloud Photo Library that puts all of your photos on the cloud. And in many cases, that gets turned on. When you set up a new phone or when you set up a new computer, it asks if you want to turn on Photo Library. But it doesn't really warn you about it's going to take all this space and you're going to have to pay for more storage. And so people turn that on, and then suddenly their storage is full. You don't need to have Photo Library turned on, because that's all of your photos, because Photo Stream automatically copies the last 1,000 photos between all your devices. 1,000 photos or 30 days, whichever is longer, and that doesn't count toward your storage. So with Photo Stream, you take a picture on your phone, it shows up on your computer, and vice versa. And it will keep 1,000 of them, which for most people is more than enough. And if you want any older photos, you can manually copy them back. So you don't actually need iCloud storage. It's just more convenient for iCloud storage. But 99 cents a month is nothing. The next tier up is $2.99 for 200 gigs, and you get that with family sharing as well. And that allows you to have a shared photo space between your family members. So you can have a shared photo library that everyone in your family puts their photos on, which is kind of handy. I've had a couple of customers in the last couple of weeks or so that they just pay the $10 a month for 2 terabytes because that's the most you can get. And even then, $10 a month for 2 terabytes isn't all that much. But I had one customer that was only using 30 gigs and said, well, you don't really need to spend $10 a month. You'll be okay with $1 a month. Yeah. Yeah, so that's another option. Yep. And the other one that a lot of people like is Google Photos. That's one of them that I use. Google gives you 15 gigabytes of free cloud space. So they're among the highest of all of the free tiers. And with Google Photos, it's unlimited photo storage for photos less than 16 megapixels, which most people's are, unless you're a high-end photographer with a super whiz-bang camera. And so I use Google Photos and Apple Photo Stream, so that on my computer, Google Photos looks in my photo library, so whenever I take a photo, it actually ends up in both places. But with Google Photos, all of my photos, I've got like 200 gigs of photos that don't count with Google Photos because they're all low enough resolution. In fact, some of my earliest photos were taken on a Sony Mavica that used a floppy disk as its storage media, and they were 640 by 480, so the 0.6 megapixels. It's interesting. You can't zoom in on them very much. You know, they fill your screen, but that's about it. You can't zoom. George? So one of the other options that some people like, when you get your iPad, for example, you can get an iPad with cellular for $130 more, and then it has its own cell plan. Or you can turn your phone into a hotspot, and then the hotspot will publish to your iPad, to your computer, to anything to get on the internet when you're not in Wi-Fi. There's a built-in hotspot feature, part of the iPhone, and that uses your carrier settings. So it depends on your carrier. Some carriers throw in hotspot as part of your data plan. Some carriers charge you an extra, say $10 a month for hotspot, and some carriers charge you by the gig for your hotspot. So it all depends on the carrier, which leads to, if your carrier is charging you more, then switch carriers. Or there are standalone hotspot devices. I know, Rick, you used to use ClearSpot, and that was, what, $45 a month for unlimited, something like that? Yeah. Sprint bought them out and killed the good deal. So a lot depends on how much you're away from Wi-Fi and need to use cellular. So what your cellular usage is can depend on what your hotspot requirements are. So in the Mac quarterly revenue, their Mac sales actually went up to $7.4 billion. The other thing Apple announced a few weeks ago is they announced that they're not going to announce numbers, how many unit sales. They're only going to announce revenue. And so one of the things that helps is they can say the revenue went up even though the unit sales may have gone down because they raised the price of the computers. So revenue for Macs went up. The revenue for Macs is up 9%. And so through 2016 it was off, and then it jumped, and then we're off, and now we're up again. iPad revenue is up dramatically, especially from last quarter, and some of that we think is the 329 standard iPad that can use the pencil, and then the iPad Pro is coming out with the larger screen, especially the 11-inch iPad Pro, where they made the screen bigger without making the device any bigger. That's kind of a real sweet spot in there. But again, they raised the prices a little bit, and we talked about that at the time. And they kept the 10.5-inch iPad Pro in the product line at the lower price. So that's kind of interesting there. iPad revenue was down. iPhone revenue because this is the 4-quarter average. iPhone revenue is down, and a lot of people are worried that means the iPhone is dying. Well, no, they made $40 billion in just iPhone, so that's not going to die anytime soon. And year over year, iPhone is down again. Part of that we think is because the XS and XR weren't that big a deal over the 10 from last year. So each year the phones aren't radically better than last year's. And most people are not upgrading every year anymore. There was some demand for the XS Max because the 10 didn't have a Plus version. So if you like the Plus phones that are bigger, you may have got a 10 last year because it was bigger than the 8, but not as big as the 8 Plus, so now the XS Max is the Plus version. And then the XR was an interesting version. It was basically the 10 from last year at $250 less, and so Apple said that sold pretty well. Again, they don't give numbers, but year over year, it's not that big a jump. And the fact that Apple was offering a $29 battery replacement on old phones. I think we did 200 batteries in December. So if you had an iPhone 6 or 6S that wasn't working well, probably because the battery was worn out, because it was 4 or 5 years old now. For 29 bucks, you almost felt like you got a new phone because everything was working again. And so that was another reason people weren't upgrading phones. In fact, there's another class action lawsuit about that Apple intentionally slows down your phones to force you to buy a new phone. Not quite, but there was a little bit of ammunition to that. Apple did make a change in OS 10 so that, and we talked about it when it came out with OS 11, when your battery gets weak, they slow down your phone so that it doesn't crash. Because there was a big problem with OS 10 with your iPhones would just shut off or spontaneously reboot. So they fixed that by slowing down the processor so it wouldn't over demand the battery, so the battery could keep working. And someone did some benchmark tests and discovered that's how they did it, by slowing the clock speed down. So then Apple added a button where you can decide whether you want your phone to crash or if you want it to slow down. And so you choose. If you want it to crash, it will stay at high performance until it crashes. If you want it to slow down when the battery's weak, it will slow down and not crash. And then with the lower price on the battery replacement, in fact, the January 1st they raised the price from the $29 it was, but they only raised it to $49 on most phones. They didn't go back to the $79 it used to be, which is kind of a pain in the ass. Because it takes us about an hour to do a phone with all the paperwork and testing and this and that and the other thing, and they don't pay us enough for that. But so for an end user, it's really handy. George? Yeah. So now they've added also in OS 12, they added a diagnostic called Battery Health. So in settings, might be able to even find it here. Settings, and then battery, and then health. It will show you the, there we are, some pictures. It will show you the health of your battery and how many cycles it has. No, it doesn't show cycles, it shows percentage. So it will warn you when your battery percentage gets low. I don't know if you can see that or not very well. So settings, battery health. And it also shows you your battery usage. So one of the problems people often had is their battery would drain too fast. And it wasn't necessarily that the battery was weak. It was they had apps running in the background that were draining the battery. You might have left Skype running, or you might have left another program running using the battery. And in fact, after a major OS upgrade, it will re-index your photo library so you can find faces and places in your photo library, and that uses a lot of power. So a lot of people noticed after doing the OS 11 and then again the OS 12 upgrade that their battery didn't last as long for a few days until that indexing finished, and then that wasn't running in the background so that it didn't empty your phone again. Yeah. Right. When you buy a phone, or when you buy a battery, so the maximum capacity is 100%. Say it's 10 hours to make the math easy. So as the phone ages, the maximum capacity gets lower and lower. So now your phone, instead of being 10 hours, is only 8.7 hours. Eventually, when the phone gets below 80%, Apple considers that degraded. And it used to be that's when they would offer the battery replacement, but now they're doing it anyway. So you can decide how long your battery is lasting until you decide you want to pay for a battery replacement. And so the lower that gets, the less time your battery will last. And some people get confused by that because they say that my battery had 100% charge, but it only lasted 5 minutes. Well, because your battery capacity was probably 1%. So when you first get it, that 100% is, say, 10 hours. And as the battery dies, 100% is 5 minutes. When it doesn't last all day long enough for me, if I have to charge it too many times during the day, Nominally, Apple said 80% was the general guideline. Let me see what my phone is at now. I have a 7, which is older, and my battery health is 87% also. Quite a while. So there was the 6, the 6S, oh, an SE. So yeah, that was the 6 in the 5 clothing. Yeah. So one of the issues is that generally they expect the batteries to last about 1,000 charge cycles, and if you charge your battery every day, that's about 3 years. Right. So most people plug it into the charge overnight and just let it charge back up to 100% overnight. And so a 3-year battery life you never noticed because you replaced your phone every 2 years. And so it was never an issue until people started keeping their phones longer and longer and longer. And now running into this 3 and 4 years, we had one guy that had 2,000 charge cycles on his battery. And we were surprised that he was able to still use it. So the new battery in the phone, giving your old phone new life, is likely part of the drop in iPhone sales. Let's see, iPhone revenue was up. Service revenue was the big one, being up 19%. For a 4-quarter average, it was up 10%. And what was next? Year over year, that was the 19%. Now, the wearables is an interesting topic. So that's your watch. So wearables, home, and accessories. So that's the Apple Watch, the HomePod, Apple TV, all that type of stuff. That also rose. So Apple has said that the Apple Watch is the #1 selling watch, period. Not smartwatch, not digital watch, just watch. They outsell Rolex and everybody else, partly because it's quite a bit cheaper than a Rolex. Is it the cheap Rolex is 20 grand? Yeah. And so wearables is a growing category. The Apple Home is a growing category. And so their total revenue, $84 billion for the quarter. Now, that was the quarter ending December 31st, which includes Christmas. So Apple's first quarter is September, October, November, December. So it's the fourth calendar quarter, but it's the first fiscal quarter. And a lot of companies do that, so their first quarter includes Christmas, which is the big seller. Profit was $20 billion. And somebody worked out that that's 35% gross profit when typical average retail markup at like Walmart is 100%. So Apple's actually less than average, but 30% profit sounds like a lot. And one of the other big things is that China didn't grow as much as they thought. Partly because Huawei and who's the other one? ZTE. The big Chinese cell phone manufacturers have really good phones that are cheaper than the iPhone, especially when you count import duties, which is interesting because the iPhone is made in China, and then it gets shipped to America and then exported back to China for sale. We always used to hear stories about people standing in line to get their phones on brand new phone day, and there was always some Chinese businessman that was paying people to wait in line to buy phones so they could ship a dozen phones home. In fact, it got so bad Apple had to start limiting it to 2 phones per person because someone would walk in and buy 20 phones. Whatever phones they had there in the store, they would buy them all. So that got to be a big issue. And also then there's a lot of concern over the trade war with China and possible spying with devices manufactured in China. There was a big story in Bloomberg about the Chinese manufacturer putting a secret chip in products. That was never proven. The third-party detailed forensics couldn't find anything. People that owned some of these boards did their own forensic, couldn't find anything. And the only thing Bloomberg said is we stand by our story. 17 anonymous sources said this happened, and we think it was all FUD. Charlie? Yeah. So yeah. I remember reading a story about, I forget what it was. It was some like a dress or something, and it was cheaper to ship the fabric to Vietnam to have it cut and sewn and shipped back than it was to actually make it here. And I remember when I was a kid, all my parents' friends all worked, piecework at manufacturing plants where you had to make 100 things an hour or you didn't, or you lost money. And everyone hated the monotony of that work. And that was one of the reasons a lot of the manufacturing plants shut down here and moved overseas, because they apparently don't mind that, because it's a job. In fact, the plant in Shenzhen, ironically owned by a Taiwanese company in China, where almost every electronic device is built by Foxconn. That plant employs about 1 million people, so they could never build that anywhere in America because you can't find a worker base of 1 million people anywhere. And they said about every day, about 20 or 30,000 people show up to get a job, and all you need is your identity card, and you get a job. But every day, about 20 or 30,000 people leave after working however long they wanted to. So 1 million people working at this factory. There was a big issue a few years ago where there were some very public suicides, and the company put nets around the building to catch people. So they wouldn't die, because the company had a very high-paying suicide clause, basically, in the company insurance. And rural people were coming from, destitute, basically subsistence farmer communities would come into the city to earn money, and they would send most of their money home. And if you happen to be the second, or heaven forbid, a third child, because that was illegal at the time, then your death could pay the family more. So everyone was upset about these deaths. There were like 30 deaths in this factory one year, and there was news specials and wage or human rights activists were going, until someone pointed out that the national average for China is 35 per million. So this plant is actually lower than average. It's just there's 1 million people working at this plant. Foxconn built another one in Brazil, where a lot of the South American products are made. Foxconn got a huge subsidy to build a plant in Wisconsin, I think it was, and scaled back their plant drastically, and then decided they were going to build LCD panels instead to get shipped to Europe. But we're seeing a lot of shifting manufacturing, because average, I don't want to be too generic, but most workers don't want to do piecework. And so, what was it? There was a plant in Buffalo that Governor Cuomo highlighted a few months ago. Most of the jobs being created now are high-tech jobs. So there's a complaint about the robots are building everything. We'll learn how to program the robots. Those are the jobs now, is programming the robot or building the robot. As soon as the robots can build themselves, we're in trouble. And so the job market is shifting, and the low-paying, unskilled jobs are basically disappearing, and people are rightly upset about that. But then most people don't want to work a low-paying, unskilled job. So it's kind of a double-edged sword there. Let's see. I think that was most all of the cool. Jason does all these cool graphs when he does that. So that was their quarter. Very, very good quarter. from a revenue point. There was also, what was there? Excuse me, I think they did a stock buyback and a dividend. Yeah, $13 billion in value went back to the investments. $130 billion in cash. And they declared a dividend of 73 cents per share. So if you own Apple stock, you were happy. And when the announcement that they were going to miss their earnings and the stock dropped, the next day it rebounded even higher because everyone bought the stock at the lower price because they know it's going to keep going up. So if you're a day trader, you don't want it. But if you're in it for the long haul, then it will probably be a much better investment over time. But a lot of people are wondering, what's the next thing going to be? And if you can invent the next thing, you're going to be rich and famous. So is the iPhone will eventually get replaced by something. Either there'll be too many people and they won't be able to sell more iPhones because everyone's already got one, or the new ones aren't compelling enough, or that was one of the big quotes of Steve Jobs, is that people don't know what they want until I tell them, sort of. So we didn't know we needed a tablet. We didn't know we needed a smartphone until they came out and we saw how useful it was. And almost overnight, the BlackBerry died and the iPhone took over. And what's interesting is in the U.S., iPhone is dominant, but the rest of the world, Android is dominant. Here in the U.S., it's 70-30, I think, iPhone to Android. And Google has a lot of their own problems with Android. One of the big issues is security patches and updates. There's a lot of fake applications that get released, and every now and then you hear about Google removing applications from the Google Play Store. Let's see, remove apps from store, and what happens is, oops, that didn't work. How do I get back to that? What happens is that with the Google Store, anyone can submit an app. There we are. So a year ago, they did 700,000 bad apps. Google doesn't vet the apps as much as Apple does, and anyone can post an app to the Play Store, and so there'll be a malicious app that doesn't do what it says it does. It will do something extra, and that will get removed from the App Store. The other thing we're seeing is that companies are, especially the big companies, are not wanting to pay Apple the 30% cut for being hosted in the App Store. And for a small company, hosting your own downloads is very expensive. And marketing and advertising that the App Store does for you is very expensive. So for a small company, the App Store is a really great boon. The problem is that once you get big, you don't like that 30% cut. And so a game like Fortnite, anyone play Fortnite? No? Fortnite was a game from Epic. There we are. And that's probably that's the school, blocking it. Fortnite is a free game. It's basically a battle royale where was it last man standing? 100 people start in the area, and the last man standing wins. But it's a free game. Epic makes about $100 million a month selling skins and dance moves and extra stuff in this free game that they don't like Apple taking a 30% cut of. So when they release the Android version, they wouldn't put it in the Google Store because Google takes a 30% cut too. So on the iPhone, you must install apps from the App Store. You can't, what's called side load. You can't load an app from another store unless you jailbreak your phone. In fact, the Cydia store just shut down, if I remember right, which was one of the big third-party side-loading stores. So Fortnite published the Android version with instructions on how to turn off the safety features that prevent you from side-loading malicious apps on your Android phone, to allow you to install Fortnite directly from Epic, so they wouldn't have to pay Google. Within hours of their announcement, there were hundreds of fake Fortnite installers flying all over the internet. Within hours, yep, telling people how to turn off the security protection so they can install Fortnite, and it installs malicious software because you've turned off your security. So we're expecting that at some time Apple is going to possibly change the cut, and they have lowered it a bit for subscription services. So if you subscribe to, say, Netflix on your Apple device with your Apple ID, the billing goes to your Apple ID credit card, and Apple takes 30% cut. So one of the things that Amazon has done for years is you cannot buy a Kindle book in the Kindle app on your Mac or iDevice. You have to buy it on the website, so Apple doesn't get a cut, and then you import it into your store. So Netflix announced they're going to stop selling subscriptions on Apple TV, so Apple stops taking the 30% cut. So you're going to have to go to the website, and you can do it right in the website on your iPad or iPhone to renew your subscription, to do your subscription, and then log in on the Apple device. They're just not letting Apple take that cut. What Apple announced a couple years ago is that I think the second year subscription cuts, they lowered it's a referral fee to like 15% or something like that. Rick, you have a comment on that? Yep. Yeah, so one of the things Apple tries to do, and Google tries to do it too, but they pretty much fail on the Android side. The iOS installed base and the number of people using the latest versions of iOS is dramatically higher than it is on other platforms. So iOS 12, 70%. It makes it easier for developers to be able to develop knowing the OS that's going to be on the other end. If you had to support the older OSs, it's extra development time, because in most cases there's a feature in the new OS you want to use, so you have to figure out a workaround for the old OS. And so every now and then Apple has started, will say that you now have to make all your all your games compatible with this OS minimum, and they have now also started two-factor authentication. In fact, I think in the Mojave they started suggesting it in High Sierra, and in the Mojave they're almost demanding it, that you turn on two-factor for your Apple ID, which is a way of minimizing the exposure for bad guys breaking into your Apple account. So whenever you log into your Apple account on a new device, it sends a code to your old device to prove it's really you doing it. So even if a bad guy gets your password, they can't log into your account without having your phone also. And so that's an extra security layer. And they are really starting to try to push that. A lot of companies use two-factor authentication using text messaging, but text messaging isn't that secure, and text messages can be easily spoofed and intercepted. So Apple uses their iMessage encrypted communication system for it, so that works a lot better. So in a lot of the more secure Android worlds, they will use a security key from, there's YubiKey has one, PayPal, and well, I think PayPal just discontinued theirs. Several companies have hardware keys that become your second factor authentication because text messaging is not secure. Every now and then we hear about somebody whose account got broken into, even with a two-factor turned on, because the bad guy intercepted the text message, because they could spoof the IMEI number, and your identity on your phone then becomes the bad guy and gets all your messages too. So that can be an interesting issue. because your computer's a trusted device. So I see that every now and then too. If I log in to, say, iCloud.com in Safari for the first time, then it asks for my two-factor. But the computer is already set up for two-factor via the iCloud system preference. So that's why you see it. And then you can say, trust this browser, and it doesn't ask you again. But then you say you install Chrome, and then you have to do it all over again because it's a different browser. But it's an interesting option. So if somebody gets your computer, they could log into your account because your computer's already trusted, which is why you need to use a good password on your computer. But we often say physical access throws out all the rules. If someone has physical access to your computer, they can do almost anything they want. And that can even be physical access for a few minutes. So you get up, big problem in like coffee shops, you get up to go refill your coffee, someone comes into your computer because you just left it there, and they will go, there's another update. They will go in and say, go into your sharing control, and in a moment turn on file sharing, and then they have access to your stuff. Or if they want to be really quick, they can make themselves a username. So in less than a minute, they can turn on file sharing and create a username on your computer, and then go sit back down at their table and log into your computer and take all your stuff. So you should have a password lock in the security preference. You can require your password after the screensaver turns on, so that if you get up and walk away, the screensaver will turn on, and then someone needs a password. A lot of people are now FileVault are turning on FileVault disk encryption, and with System 1014 APFS, you can also encrypt at the disk level. Encryption is a good security practice. So if someone physically gets your computer, they still can't get to your data because it's encrypted with a password. The danger becomes if something goes wrong, you can't get to your data either because it's encrypted. We joke that the encryption is a blob of noise. So without the password, all your data is a blob of noise. So if something goes wrong, you forget your password, it's a blob of noise. You can't even get to it. So it makes backing up even more important. George? Yes, one of the things that the encryption does is, it often takes hours and hours overnight to do the initial encryption. And then every time a file opens, it has to get decrypted. And every time a file is saved, it gets encrypted. And that includes all the system files that are always being opened and closed, and your application files that are always being opened and closed while you're working. So it's not just the file you actually have open that you're typing in, it's everything. And that can slow the computer down, especially on a spinning hard drive. We were really annoyed that somewhere back in the Sierra installation days, there was a question about, do you want to turn on FileVault? And the answer, it was on by default, so if you just hit continue, it turned it on. And then we got a lot of people coming into the shop. My computer's really slow since I ran this update. Well, yeah, you turned on encryption. On a solid state drive, it's not as noticeable because it's so fast as it is. But in general, most people don't need encryption turned on. Maybe if you're in the medical field or the legal field, or have company secrets on your computer. For the average people, it doesn't need to be there. But it's nice that Apple is allowing it. We're not quite sure if we like it that it's on by default now. Because it does make recovering from a problem a lot harder, which makes backups even more important. Excuse me. And in fact, when you turn on Time Machine, it asks you if you want to encrypt your backup. So if you have an encrypted main drive and an encrypted backup drive, then you might lose everything on both because if something goes wrong, theoretically something won't go wrong to both of them at the same time. But we have heard so many stories about my Time Machine's been telling me there's a problem, and I haven't just gotten around to fixing it yet. Well, how long has that been? Oh, about 6 months. Rick, and then George. Maybe. So SSD drives are really fast for reading, not quite as fast for writing, but either way they are faster than spinning drives. When data is written to a cell on an SSD, it actually has to burn through the insulation around the cell to store a value there. There are very fast SSDs, which are called single-level cells. So the cell holds either no charge, which is a 0, or a charge, which is a 1. And every time it writes data, it burns through the insulation and wears that cell out a little bit. So most of the newer drives in the last 3 years use something called wear leveling. So when you read data from over here and then save that file again, it will write it over here, so that it wears out the drive at an even level. But with encryption, reading an encrypted, and then if it has to make a change and write back the new encryption, that will use the drive up more. There was also an issue with cache files in Chrome and Firefox especially. People were seeing terabytes of data written to their flash drive every day by the cache files. So every time you go to a website, it downloads the cache, and it downloads a bunch of stuff you may not see, and it often will download things from links on that page. So the browser will follow the link and download that stuff for you in case you click on the link, because then it makes it faster. But it ends up downloading so much stuff that people were seeing their SSDs wearing out so much faster because of this multi-terabytes a day. Chrome and Firefox have addressed that by decreasing the amount of time the cache is written. I think initially it was it every 300 milliseconds? I think it wrote the cache, some ridiculously high, which is slow for a computer, but very high for SSD failing. The other thing that has happened in the SSD market is one of the ways that SSDs have gotten cheaper. I remember one of a 512 gig SSD that one of our customers got for his Mac Pro was over $1,000, and now a terabyte drive I just put in for a customer the other day was $150. And so one of the things they've done is they've moved to multi-level cells. So you'll see this in the detailed specs on an SSD. There'll be SLC or MLC. So a multi-level cell will put, in fact, I'm not sure if Apple counts that in their description. A multi-level cell will store multiple bits per cell. So instead of just a, because it's a PCIe, where is it? NVMe. Instead of just a 1 or a 0, they'll put half a volt. And so 0, 1/4, 1/2, or 0, 1/2, and 1 gives you 3 bits per cell. And some of the SSDs are doing 4 bits per cell. Some are doing 6 bits per cell. And so that ends up meaning the cells are written sometimes more frequently, but it also means that the voltage difference in a cell is so minute that drives are relying more and more on error correction. In fact, the same thing on spinning drives. The data density is so high that the error correction features built into the drives are being used more because they just can't handle the bit density. What is, let me see, hard drive bit density. Something, terabytes per square inch, some ridiculous bits. Yeah, Seagate has 1.3 terabits per square inch on one of their drives. So the companies are always trying to figure out ways to store more data. Now, the first hard drive was 2,000 bits per square inch, and that IBM 350 was the size of a refrigerator, the hard drive. And so people, the companies are always trying to get more data in a smaller package because that means it's faster to read with the drive spinning. It used to be they just add another platter to get higher capacity, but people are now don't want physically bigger drives, and now we're moving more and more toward flash drives on everything, so that they're faster yet. So having a backup is now even more important because your SSDs are wearing out possibly faster. Let's see. Yeah, this doesn't tell me what. It's an Apple SSD. Oh, that's probably a Samsung drive. Let me see if we can see what model that is. Benchmarks, speed, life expectancy. But it starts with SM, so it's probably Samsung. Yeah. Yeah, but they buy them from somebody. It's usually Samsung and Toshiba are the two big. Samsung is interesting. Samsung is a competitor to Apple on a lot of things, but they're also a principal supplier for a lot of other things. So it's because partly because Samsung is such a monstrous company. You know, they make construction cranes, they make ships, and they make smartphones. Giant companies. Alrighty. Yep. Mm-hmm. You cannot wipe clean an SSD. Don't. Well, it depends on how, because of wear leveling, you cannot be sure an SSD is wiped. Because you say erase disk, well, even now, erase disk doesn't really erase the disk. It just marks the space as free. The data is still there. So disk utility used to have an option to overwrite disks, and it's not going to give me because I've only got one drive. Right. Yeah. With a spinning hard drive, you can do a 0 pass, or I think there's an 8-way pass, or there's 3-way, 8-way, 35-way, 9-way, something like that. I tried a 35-way pass once and let it go a week and gave up. So it writes so at least a 3-way. So writing zeros to every bit will zero out the drive as for a spinning drive, unless they have really good forensic software at the other end. So a 3-way pass is the most secure. So basically it writes zeros, it writes ones, it writes the zeros. So everything is gone. With an SSD, because of the wear leveling, you cannot be sure you're writing to every bit. Because even though you say write this bit, it might be over here once, it might be over there once. So SSDs, you cannot securely erase. And so Apple removed that option from disk utility. One of the things you can do is encrypt the data before use, then it's stored as a blob of noise. Then it doesn't matter what you do to the drive. Without the password, it's a blob of noise. Yeah. But if there was already data on it before you encrypted it, there's no way to tell it that that data is gone. And it may not be gone. No. So the data is here. You said encrypt it, read it, and wrote it over there. This unencrypted data is still here. Before you put any data on it at all, the very first time. That's the problem. So if you encrypt your data now, it reads the data and then writes it encrypted. That bit where it might be read from may not be encrypted and may still be there. For 99% of the time, just erase it and reinstall the OS. It's no big deal. But for people that are determined enough and with the right forensic tools, they could theoretically get your data. But it ain't easy and it ain't cheap. So that's one advantage of encrypting the drive when you get it, before you put any data on it, because then it's a blob of noise and won't be recoverable. We are waiting for the time, and we're guessing it might be the next OS when Macs are coming pre-encrypted. When you buy a brand new Mac, it may come already encrypted. We're not quite sure we like that or not. There's good. Yep. Yeah. And even the first month, because when you decrypted it, all of the decrypted data was written to the drive. Yeah, that's the other option, is you just destroy the drive when you sell it and put in a new drive in, which is a little harder said than done. But on that privacy point, CES was last week, and next month we're going to have Todd come in and talk about all the cool stuff from CES. Apple put up this big poster on a Marriott hotel. Ironically, we'll get to in a moment. In CES in Las Vegas, what happens on your iPhone stays on your iPhone, except for your iCloud backups, which go to Apple, and your messages, which go to Apple, and your photos, which go to Apple. So they needed to have a little asterisk at the bottom there. And that was basically a big-headed Android for all the security problems that Android tends to have. Apple generally has not had major security flaws, other than people's weak passwords. But they did tout this, and in fact, Marriott ran into a problem last month. They 2 years ago they purchased a company that 2 years earlier had a data breach and didn't know about it for 2 years. Didn't tell Marriott when Marriott bought them, and 500 million data records were lost, and there we are. So 500 million records were lost, including potentially your passport number, your name, your address, your Marriott credentials, your Marriott account information, possibly your credit card information, Starwood Hotels. So Marriott bought Starwood Hotels, and Starwood Hotels had the breach in their reservation system. And the bad guys were in the hotel for 2 years without anyone noticing. And Marriott still bought them. They didn't tell Marriott when Marriott bought them, and so this happened 4 years ago. So the 2 years that they were in there, and then the 2 years before Marriott actually bought them. That is very close to, I think that's the second highest breach. Yahoo still holds that breach with 3 billion records lost. And so they had they had a link to see if your data was possibly affected, and they should have emailed you if they think it was. But what you want to do is every now and then go to Have I Been Pwned? And in fact, you can notify when your credentials are lost somewhere. So you can put in your email address, and it will tell me that, oh no, I've been pwned. So my email account has been lost in 6 breaches. And because that's my business account where it doesn't change, or a lot of people have a home address that doesn't change, so whenever an account gets lost or breached, that's your data. So the Adobe breach, the B2B, and the collection. So collection 1 was a new one. The bad guys even steal lists from other bad guys. Collection 1 was a new 773 million unique addresses that were found out of 2.7 billion records in this Collection 1. So some bad guy went around and collected all of the breached information and put it into one file. LinkedIn got breached, and the real interesting one with LinkedIn, it was originally in 2012, and then 4 years later in 2016, somebody started selling the LinkedIn data, and so it went around again, and people were warned to change their LinkedIn information. So 6.4 billion pwned accounts for people. If you want, this is safe, but it's not. It's worrisome. You can put in your password. So when an account gets breached at the other end, many times your username and password. Your username is your email address that you use on every website. So there's almost no way around that. Most websites require an email address, or they require your Facebook login, which is even worse. Facebook loses your data all the time. And the password. If the company's good, they'll have encrypted and salted and hashed and made your password irretrievable. Not all companies are good, and a lot of plain text passwords have been found. Also, there was one big breach where the hint was in plain text. Many people have a password hint, so if you forget your password, type it wrong 3 times, it gives you a hint. Many people put their password in the hint, or many people make the hint too easy. You know, who won the Super Bowl in 2018? Well, that's easy enough to look up. Or my dog's name, Spot, Rover. So very easy to guess that. So you can type in passwords, and it will tell you if that password has been found. So I use the password password. So 3.6 million people, or a million times, someone used the word password in an account that has been breached. Do not use password as your password. What was the joke going around now? Don't use beef as your password because it's not stroganoff. Somebody put me on a pun list, and I really like them. Yeah, pun. I think it's pun-based humor on Facebook. So go to Have I Been Pwned? Go to Notify, and so I got notification last month when this Collection 1 came out that my account was lost again. I think my Apple account has not been lost yet. Yeah, so that has not been lost because for longest time, I was just using my work address, or my Roadrunner account has been breached several times. So we always talk about you need a strong password on your services, and it's not you, it's the other end. The other end gets breached, and if you used a weak password or the same password on Joe's blog where you needed to make an account to post a reply, if you use that same password at Amazon, now the bad guys have this breached password. They'll try Amazon and PayPal and Citibank and KeyBank and SunTrust. SunTrust is a big target because it's in Florida, and all the old people who aren't technically sophisticated are maybe using it. So the password gets breached one place, the bad guys know to try that password at all the other places. And in fact, some people try to get tricky. And so if I'm going to do P, I'll do an @ sign instead of an A, SSW, a 0 instead of an O, RD. 50,000 times. The bad guys know that, so that doesn't help any. From the breached passwords, people have done analysis and have determined that websites that require a capital letter, the first letter is almost always capitaled. And websites that require a symbol, the last character is almost always an exclamation mark. So don't do that. On websites that need a password, don't make it first. And on ones that want a symbol, don't make it last. That's a way to help secure your password. And you can use a password manager. With Apple, we've got the keychain built in, and your passwords are locked under your master password. And you're probably using it even if you don't know it. Whenever you sign into a website, it will ask if you want to save the password. When you sign in to a Wi-Fi access point, it saves your password. And if you ever need to, you can go to the Keychain utility to get your passwords. And you can retrieve a password that you've lost, or not lost, but forgotten. Where's my password list? I thought I had a... No, sort of. So Safari uses it. Chrome and Firefox have their own password manager built into them, but then they don't share that password to other apps. The advantage of using Keychain is that other apps that need your password can look in your Keychain. It syncs them to your phone. There's iCloud Keychain that will sync to your phone and your iPad. If you use Firefox on all your devices, you can sign up for Firefox password syncing, and then Google Chrome has password syncing into itself. The one disadvantage of Keychain is it is Apple only, which isn't a disadvantage for most of us. But if you happen to have a Windows machine or an Android machine, then 1Password is probably one of the best password services. LastPass is another one. What is the one that I think this is the one that Steve Gibson liked. KeePass is another one, yep. LastPass. Yeah, that's right, LastPass. He actually now Steve Gibson, who does a security blog on the Twit network. We were a little unsure. They got bought by LinkedIn. No, they got bought by LogMeIn, so we weren't sure if that was going to be good or not. So far, it's been okay. So Steve Gibson was able to go to what's his name? Secret? I forget. The guy that wrote LastPass, got the source code, did a security vet, saw it was done right, and it's a full trust no one. If you forget your master password, you're screwed. They don't have your password either. And then when LogMeIn bought LastPass, he went back and talked to Joe, his name was, again, to verify that Joe is still working on it. They haven't changed any of their security policies. LastPass is free if you save the passwords yourself, or for $3 a month, you can save the passwords on their server in an encrypted state. So they're encrypted on your device, sent over the internet encrypted, and stored encrypted, so they still can't get your passwords. But that does then let you share your 1Password vault among your devices. So that's handy if you have non-Apple devices. That might be a discount. $3 a month or $10 a year. Let's see. No, $36. Well, that's premium. They might have something besides premium. There we go, pricing. Yeah, if you store your encrypted vault on Dropbox, that's probably okay. Dropbox has had a lot of breaches, and sometimes not necessarily a breach, just a programming bug. So Dropbox makes your files publicly available on the internet. You need to log in with your password. But every now and then, there's been a bug where if you put someone else's account number up there, which looks like a random number, you put someone else's random number in the URL, and you see someone else's files. So they've had a few cases where they've accidentally made private files public to anyone who happened to know the URL. So it looks like their family version, $3 a month or $4 a month. And then they have a business version, $4 or $6 per user. So yeah, one of the things with LastPass Enterprise, they have a neat option where the IT department stores the passwords, and you can authorize a user. Say your accountant needs QuickBooks. You can authorize the user to open QuickBooks without actually telling them the password. So the LastPass running on that computer fills it in because their username is authorized. There's a big problem in businesses where you give someone a password and then they leave, they still have your password. So you have to change all your passwords around. which makes it harder for the other users because you just changed your password. So that's a nice option for I think they even have that on the personal version, because Leo talks about it during his commercials, that you can share like his Comcast password to his wife, so when she's trying to log in to watch a show on her iPad, she doesn't need to know the password. It's just LastPass says okay, and it does. So that's a nice way to do it. The other thing that Keychain has just started doing. Let me see if this is going to work. Yep. In the password list, it will tell you if that password is used on multiple sites. And so I have used a lot of this because mostly for my work stuff. We have a work password that we're supposed to use. So it will warn you if a password is used on multiple sites, so then you can go and change that password. In the Safari list, and I'm pretty sure Keychain does it too. Passwords. No, it isn't. I go by date. What's my most recent password for an airport disk? No, it isn't. So it's only in Safari. It's because it's the same password on multiple websites. So that would only make sense on a website. But most of the other commercial password managers will also warn you if you use the same password on multiple sites. And I think both LastPass and 1Password watch the Have I Been Pwned list. So when a new list comes out, they will warn you that your password may have been breached in someone else's breach. So that's a handy thing to have too. Alrighty, so I guess that was sort of a mix of news and Q&A. Oh yeah. Yeah, there was a FaceTime multi-user bug. Well, they did it two ways. That's not what I wanted. Multi-bug. So one of the big features they added in FaceTime recently. 14-year-old discovered it. Cool. Let me make sure this is still the right. Yeah. When you make a FaceTime call, with the new FaceTime, there was an option to add somebody else. So one of the things you could do, and how the bug worked, is that you would call somebody and then quickly add yourself to the call, and it auto-answered you, which then the bug was that it answered the other end. Instead of the other end answering, your device answered for the other end. And if you're doing an audio call, it turned on their mic and you could hear them. If you're doing a video call, it turned on their camera and you could see them. So instead of them answering, your device would answer for them. So it's a convenience. Your device is just going to answer for them. And so the first way Apple fixed that was turning off multi-user FaceTime at their end. And I believe in the 12.1.4 update that just came out, they fixed that also. So yeah, multi-user FaceTime is now back. How many people have used a multi-user FaceTime? To call, you can call up to 30 people on one FaceTime call now. Well, partly because Skype is only 10. Skype and Hangouts are 10. George? So the question is there a way to turn the camera off? The short answer is no. When a program is using the camera, it turns the light on. And if you notice that, you're okay. You can physically cut the wire, providing power to the camera, but then you could never turn it back on again. So most people will have started putting a piece of tape over the camera. What that doesn't solve is the microphone. And so that's not what I want. What was her password hacks? Was it? So a lot of people, there it is. A lot of people are worried about the microphone turning on, and there's no indication that the microphone is turned on. So one of the things you can do there is in your system preferences, under sound input, you can install a different device and point it to that instead of the microphone, but that's a little tricky to do. And so there's almost no way to stop that. The good thing is there are no active exploits that attack the camera or microphone. Joanna Stern, columnist for the Wall Street Journal, just published an article a few days ago that she invited a hacker to try to break into her cameras and her security and her everything, and was shocked by what happened and how easy they were able to do it. But it also points out that the built-in security on both Windows and Mac is almost always enough. So I haven't looked at the video yet. So what happened was the hacker got into their home network, got into their baby camera, took pictures of the nanny and the son, and like my editor deleted an expletive from that sentence. And so it's a really interesting story. Most people put tape over their webcams. It's an interesting story that the hacker used social engineering, and that's almost always what happens. You get an email claiming to be your benefits package from HR, or you get just a, hey, look at this. I get so many of these, hey, look at this emails with just a link, and if people click on the link, it can install a malicious program. And so what the hacker did during his test is notice that she had put a tweet out for a video producer. So he built a fake website and a fake audition role of him editing his video and emailed her the link. And so she clicked the link and she got a warning that this was a malicious file. Okay, done. To continue the testing, she turned off the warnings and let the malicious file download, which then installed the keystroke logger and got access to her camera, turned on the camera so it would snap a picture every few seconds. So it turned on, snapped the picture, turned off as fast as the computer could run, so you may never notice the green light on. Or even if you do, it goes off so fast you don't notice it anyway. And then on her Windows machine, she turned off Windows Defender, which caught the malicious download. And on the Mac, she turned off Gatekeeper to install an application from an unknown source. So Apple has got security built in called Gatekeeper. That is also under security and privacy, I think. Yeah. So you're only allowed to download apps by default from the App Store and identified developers. And an identified developer has a security token at the other end. There was a case last year where a developer security token got stolen, and malicious apps, what was it? It was Transmit, I think it was, an FTP program. A malicious app got distributed for a couple of days until it got caught because it was a stolen security identity. You can also set that so it only allows you to install apps that you download from the App Store that Apple vets before they're available. There's a third option that you can turn on. It's hidden now on 10.13 and 10.14 to allow apps from any developer. And So she did. She turned on that option to let this malicious app in, because she knew it was from him and it was part of the story. So she had to turn off a lot of security in order to get infected. But through social engineering, it's really easy for the bad guys to get you to do this. We had a guy the other day, a customer came in, thought they were calling Spectrum for a problem with their DVR, and the phone number apparently got lost in the Time Warner to Spectrum transover, and another fake tech support company, well, maybe fake tech support's maybe too strong. Another tech support company had that phone number, and we looked them up on Better Business Bureau, and there were a lot of complaints against them for saying they were Amazon or saying they were, Facebook. We're Amazon tech support. No, you're tech support for Amazon. No, you're not. You're an independent tech support that will help people with Amazon problems. So he thought he was calling Time Warner, and they had him do stuff on his computer and wanted remote access to his computer, and he let them in. Stop and think a second. Why would a problem on your DVR need access to your computer? But the guy on the phone was convincing enough. And it will often get to the point where they want credit card information or they want checking account numbers. It's easy to dispute a credit card charge. It's very difficult. Well, easy to dispute a credit card charge. Difficult to dispute a debit charge because that comes right out of your account. And it's very difficult to dispute an account charge. If you give someone your account number and routing number, it's very difficult to dispute that and get your money back. Right. So your account number is just what, a 10-digit number? Routing numbers are public, so they know pretty much every bank's routing number, and they just make up a bank account number. And with both those informations, they can pull information. They can pull money out of your account. Yep. There was an interesting case. There was the Zeus Trojan. Is a Windows Trojan. It will sit in your computer and wait for you to log into a bank and then intercept all the data. So your balance comes forward. Zeus says, ooh, balance, and sends that balance number to the screen for you to see. Then it empties your balance. And whenever you refresh the screen or do something more, the Zeus Trojan says, oh, no, your balance is still there, while it empties your account. And we've even had customers where the bad guy gets their routing information. So I'm going to give you $1,000, and I just need you then to write me a check back for $500 for this service, and then you'll make $500. Without seeing, they took the $1,000 from savings and transferred it to checking. And when you're on the website looking at your bank account, you see a $1,000 deposit. Oh, he sent me $1,000. Thanks. And then write a $500 check. George. So the new threats are changing. The threat of a virus is nearly extinct, although crypto viruses are very popular now, especially on Windows. Either a fake email or a fake website or a fake ad on a website. And there was some badly written crypto malware. And so the good guys, in fact, Malwarebytes, I think, was one of the good guys that joined this foundation, have written tools to decrypt encrypted files that were encrypted by bad malware. But there's some of them are good malware, and you cannot get your files back without paying the ransom or having a backup. And so the threats are changing. In fact, for a while, fake encryption ransomware was popular. Your files are encrypted. Send us money. No, they're not. They're lying. Because the bad guys are generally lazy. It's easier to lie. And so what's happening now is fake ads saying you're infected, fake ads saying you're encrypted, or a fake ad saying, is your computer slow? They get you to call them, and then they get into your computer and rummage around. And oftentimes they'll open a terminal window and they'll type a netstat command. So most people don't know terminal. Most people don't know NetStat. And they'll see this. Oh, my God, all these established connections. Those are people breaking into your computer right now. No, it's my computer talking out to other people. Software update, checking to see if you have an update. App Store, checking to see if you have an update. Microsoft Office went back there when I opened Lyle's presentation. It checked to see if I have an update. And so these are ways to scare you into thinking someone is attacking your computer. And they do all they can to scare you into thinking that. So then you give them money. And the new thing they've been doing now is they're giving you a subscription. Because if they say it's $100, well, it was $600 was the common number we see, $600 to clean your computer, and they don't, that's more obviously fraud that your credit card company will reverse. So now they're saying it's $600 a year for service to clean your computer anytime you need it. And that's a lot harder to dispute. In fact, we've seen some of them now, it's a 2 or 3 year plan where, for 3 years we'll come in and clean your computer anytime you want. And they clean you out. So they scare you. They try to do enough so you lose patience or lose interest watching them. We had a customer where they took so long, she left them in her computer and went to bed. Let them rummage around her computer all night long. A lot of people have a file called passwords on their desktop or important information. And so they'll rummage around and find that and get it. And so to answer your question, Malwarebytes for Mac is one of the best anti-malware programs available. And a lot of fake ads on websites will install malicious software, especially if you're running as an administrator user. We've talked about this in the past. The very first user you create on your computer is an administrator. And the administrator has privilege to do a lot of things, including install apps. We recommend that you always run as a standard user and keep the administrator user for administration things like installing new apps or installing updates and things. So you can get malicious software accidentally installed, inadvertently installed, downloaded. We call them drive-by downloads. And you went to a website. We used to say it was the naughty parts of the internet, the porn sites, the adult sites, where all the malicious software was. Now the bad guys figured out they can buy an ad on CNN and BBC and Fortune and Time and Democrat and Chronicle a couple of weeks ago got hit. And so legitimate websites will be hosting fake ads that download and install software because you're running as an admin. And then you may start getting more ads to make you think you're really infected. So they do everything they can to make you think you're infected, to call the phone number, to buy the fake software. Mac Cleaner, Mac Keeper, Advanced Mac Keeper, Advanced Mac Cleaner. There's all these fake cleaning programs out. So Malwarebytes for Mac is one of the best ones for finding malware and removing it. The free version is a scan on demand. You scan for malware when you want. The pay version is real-time scanning. It will catch files as they download, as they install, before they install. So a lot of people like that option. $40 per device, or if you do 3 devices for $60. So if you have 3 computers, so that's $20 a device. That's a lot of people like that for that real-time scanning in the background. But for most people, the free version is fine. You just run it every now and then, or especially if you think you're having a problem. Yep. Yep, I should find what meeting we talked about that in. But basically, you go to your users and groups control panel. You authenticate with your admin user. You make a new admin user, log into that admin, and then demote your current user back to standard. We used to say you'd have to copy everything over from user to user. That's annoying. So make a new admin user and then demote your current user to standard, and then all your stuff is still there. So that works a lot easier. Alrighty, I think we're going to take a break. And then we'll have Lyle come in talking about tax software. I can take any memberships if anyone has them. Shirley's got some goodies back there. What type of goodies do we have? Yummy goodies. Good. Bathroom is way down the hall. Yeah. Yeah, the boys' room, you're young again. Well, yeah. Well, I suppose this is a high school, so there should be a men's room because there are 18-year-old high school students. No, it's still the streamer won't turn on. Yep. Yep. Oh yeah. Hmm. Where the heck is my credit card reader? Yeah. Should be in this bag. Maybe it's in one of the other bags. There. Nope. That is our soundbites. Jazz soundbites car stickers.